they say, another working day and another chore. Tomorrow, an awful price to pay.
Hello, everybody. Thank you once again for tuning into the Inward Narrow podcast. I'm your host, John, and today I'm with JD Gardner, a good friend of mine and business partner. What can you tell me about yourself, JD?
Hey, like you said, my name is JD Gardner. I am currently an engineer. I studied as an engineer in college. I work in the continuous improvement field, so it's an industrial engineering degree, but really more specific, like I said, into continuous improvement. So how do we do things better tomorrow than we did them today, and how do we do them better today than we did yesterday, even if it's just by a little bit?
Right, and I could like that as a business owner, especially somebody who's had to deal with employees in the past. I think there's something to be said about enhancing your processes. I know that you and I have had a lot of conversations about. But some of the individual approaching that you'd like to do in your own life and your ambitions, maybe tell us a little bit about that more currently. What are some of the reasons that we bring you on our podcast today, JD?
Yeah, so I guess it really started, this conversation between you and I started a while ago, about a year ago now.
Oh, yeah.
Because I reached out to you and I wanted to learn more about being a business owner, because you've taken a couple shots at it, you've had some successes, and I don't want to say some failures, but some opportunities, right?
I'll say some
Where it could have
failures
gone
for
better.
sure.
Okay,
That's
all
the
right,
point, though. Yeah.
yeah. So it's really gotten into continuous improvement in my field and surrounding fields, right? There's one main way to do it. People go in, they bring their way to see things, and they tell people this is how you need to do it. This is the way that you're going to get better. And for me, I just don't like that. My approach is a little bit different. I prefer to coach on, this is how you see the opportunities to improve, and this is how you go about doing the improvement. I don't want to tell them, this is, I've seen this 10 times, and this is what I see works best. This is what I think you need to do. I want to go in and I want to say, this is how you see where those opportunities are. I want to teach them kind of my mindset, because I don't believe in being, the smartest guy in the room. So I want to build those people up around me, and that's kind of the model that I'm trying to approach.
I see.
To reach out to in a business, right? Doing individual consulting would be, obviously the dream,
Right.
but it's just, how do I take those steps in getting there?
I think the first step, of course, is understanding what you want. I mean, I've struggled with a lot of things in my life, and it came down to, what do I truly want to do with my time, with my life, or, when a certain decision approaches my time. With all this in mind, I did want to say it does seem like you try to approach things as an individual versus as you said, somebody, you don't want to be like the smartest in the room. That could similarly be seen as somebody like, there are roles within certain companies of somebody to take like a leadership position or like a managerial position. You're somebody who's more interested in, if the work is completed in the way it needs to be, I don't need to be the person that's emboldened for it.
Right, and that's a conversation I've had at my place of employment, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is, people ask me, do you want to be the leader? Do you want to continue to be, the person, the figurehead? And I don't care. I don't care about being the person that everybody comes and talks to and asks the questions to. But what I want is, I want to make sure that we get to the right result, which in my mind is that what I call human resource development is, I don't care if we can get 50% better by the end of the year. What I care about is that I can teach the people around me how to get 20% better by the end of the year.
Right, and that there's a big distinction, and maybe we can go even deeper about this. So the distinction and maybe the roles between certain people in business, or just say working at a company in general. What I'm trying to say is, I always have a certain idea when it comes to not necessarily how we judge people, but how we evaluate them when we have to work with them, right? I've worked certain places where there's people you could say, yeah, these are maybe not the most efficient employees on the planet, but they keep the morale up, they're fun to be around, so they're worthy to be here. And just as well, if you have a different mindset where you're like, every employee needs to be making as much money for the company as possible, as, kind of the intention of most employees are for a company. That is, to make as much money for the company as possible. That's just not realistic. So it's good that you have more of a human approach to things than more of a financial idea of what things should really look like.
Yeah, that's not my direction.
Right.
it probably, maybe it comes from the non-corporate mentality. I haven't been plagued by corporate business yet.
Yeah.
Maybe in another 10 years, my story might change, right? But
Yeah, right.
But right now, that's how I feel is the best approach to it. It's not, it's not the best money making approach. It's not the most efficient approach by far, but it's human aspect, like you put it.
Well, and I think that's maybe the part that gets ignored or maybe purposely ignored on occasion when it comes to how you should evaluate what's costing you money in a business. When you have people on board where it's like, I feel like they can do good, they just need the training. Obviously, that takes time and that takes money to train that person. And so it's this constant balancing act of, is this person worth it at all? Should we continue to invest our resources with them, or should we try to find somebody new entirely? And so maybe that's the entire scope of the employment, and maybe we can even say the employment issue in this country, is that there's so many different factors that a hiring manager, somebody say, evaluating that employee's skills, that they have to look at, and it's their bias that kind of decides if, okay, maybe they're good for the company, but I just don't like them in a certain regard, or maybe they're not trainable in the way that I'd hope so, or maybe I'd have to put in 30% more effort to see a 20% return on their part. Which, to that person, a straw man, we say hypothetically, they could have a different value of how they treat people. But my understanding so far is that your value of people is in a selfless way. You don't want to be seen as the person that got it done. You just want it done for other people because it's worth it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of going back a little bit, every person is different, and what motivates every person is different. And we have to realize that as a society, right? Like, I think the old mentality is, you have a job, I'm paying you to do one specific thing or one set of specific things, and you need to do it.
Right.
But that's not what everybody is, especially now with so much competition in the business field, whether it's big business, small business, anywhere in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much for people to do for, employers, especially in our area. There's so many different employers. If you can
Right.
drive half an hour, you can get, 100 different jobs.
Oh,
Matter your skill level, right? So with that, we have to understand what it is exactly that's driving these people to be there at work. And yeah, some people, it's just the paycheck, but
right.
some people, they want growth. Some people see the benefits, right? It's some people, it's a close place to work. It's convenient. They don't have to use their brain, right? There's so many different things that can drive people.
Mm-hmm.
We have to understand that. We have to change our way of training. We have to change the way that we treat their the way that we are trying to build them up as an employee,
Right.
or the work we give them, whatever it is, right? And I'm not saying we need to go totally easy on them and say, well, we're just going to stick you in the corner and you can pack envelopes all day just because that's who you are. But, you hire them for a reason. We just have to figure out how to get them there.
And I think it's good because obviously you've worked with me in business and you've understood the hiring and firing processes of some of the people that we've had on this year, specifically this year. But moreover, there have certainly been times where I've been thankful that one, you could tell me like, hey, there's some worth to this, or maybe there's no worth to this in this regard. But it's just about how you take somebody at face value. If you're trying to evaluate an employee, one of the things that I learned from working at a warehouse, I worked at, and this is just relevant to where we live, I suppose, but the Dick's Warehouse in Conklin, New York. It was an absolutely terrible place to work. Dick's Sporting Goods, the company started in Binghamton, New York, but I would not recommend people work in warehouse if you're not of a certain mentality. And that means there are, in my mind, about three types of people. There are people that don't care what they do, they just want to make money. There are people that very much care what they do and don't really care what they make money. And then there are people that don't like being employees at all and will change their system, will work against the system or change the system to try to have it benefit them and live the life they want. I like to regard myself as the third option because I consider myself to be an entrepreneur and my mindset is that of an entrepreneur. While I worked with people at this warehouse, I was very much understanding that if there was overtime to be made, yes, I wanted to work that overtime. But certain people just did not want to because that's who they were. They didn't value making money with their time as much as somebody else say would. But just as well, if a promotion came for a certain individual where they were going to take on more responsibility for more money, they could still say no because they're comfortable in their lifestyle or their regimen. So it's with that in mind that you have to understand that, yes, there are certain people that are employees that are going to be employees that don't ever want anything more than that. And then there are certain people that are willing to go and take on more tasks to see where it takes them.
I think that's the biggest distinction. The biggest distinction between, say, two different types of workers, and the latter being the easiest type to work with.
Yeah, I like the way that you put that.
Well, thank you.
With that in mind, I do have a couple questions for you, seeing that we have you on today. I think it'll be beneficial for us to kind of be able to say a little bit more about not just why you're here today, but what else you'd like to promote. In your own words, please, can you describe us a little bit more what brings you in today specifically?
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
Of course.
Just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. Well, no, thank you. I'm not kidding
Oh,
about
no, yeah.
you having me on. But I wanted to talk, and we've talked about this over the past week or so.
Mhm.
Kind of part of that, how do we build those around us up? I am an aspiring entrepreneur, as I would put it, because I haven't tried anything out yet.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
working with you has taught me a lot, and one of the things that it taught me is that I'm definitely not ready to take the next step, to jump from a full-time job or anything like that and jump into a business. Right? I don't have an idea. I don't have the work ethic, the same work ethic that you have. As you just make stuff work. That's just not me, right?
If I can interject for 1 second, the way that I think is there are two ways to do things, and this is like an old military saying: you can do it the right way, or you can do it again.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
But
no,
yeah.
I 100% agree. And the way that I see building people up is I want to start my own podcast, which you have made me see the value in it. And
I'm glad I could do that.
I want to talk to small business owners and just have a very casual conversation about the things that have happened to them from start to beginning. I want to bring that out there because people, aspiring entrepreneurs like me, they see the hard parts of it and they don't know how to get past those. So by having those conversations with small business owners that have gone through this, have stepped through each part of it,
right?
I don't need them to share, their tips and tricks. I just want people to hear their stories, right?
Yeah,
I want people to just by understanding, by hearing the stories, it's going to ease people's mind, right? And if they pick up one or two things here or there, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
But that's not the end goal. It's just to have these people be able to tell their stories and have a forum to bring those around them up.
And I really agree with that as well. I'm definitely somebody who's very pro-community, and I try to embolden the people that I work with, especially the people that I find to be worth it. But moreover, I think it's a great idea to have what you're basically describing as a bastion of knowledge for those that are looking to do similar things, taking it from people that have been in business 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, whatever, and have been around the block, have gone through the motions, and know what it's like. And I worked with this one kid at a grocery store a while ago, and he had asked me a question, and the only reason I was really giving him a lot of information was because of the questions he was asking me. He wasn't saying, "Oh, how much money did you make as a business owner? Oh, what are some of your greatest successes?" He said, "What was one of the biggest mistakes that you made?" And I was like, that is a fantastic question, because it's not about what you learned through your successes. It's the largest failures that'll teach you more than anything. And so it's very advantageous, I would say, of business owners to want to share that information, just like kind of as a person. When you go through hard times, you usually like to tell people so they don't have to go through the same experience. So I commend what you're doing, and obviously we have you here today to promote your idea for this podcast as well as talk to you a little bit. Tell us your name the name of the podcast, and obviously if anybody's watching, you can check it out in the description. We're going to tag them as well. And when can we expect your next episode to come out?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Built from Below, referring to those people, those small business owners that are building themselves up. And, we see it as a business, but really a business is nothing less than an extension of you and your personality, right?
Right.
So they are building themselves up and not just that business. Right now, there is only what I'm calling episode 0, kind of a prologue, a self, just a conversation with myself and the microphone of what I plan out of this podcast in the next, hopefully over the next year.
Absolutely.
And then hopefully in the next week or so, I'll have an actual episode up, and I want to keep that cadence about once a week. meeting new people, obviously in the future having returning guests to tell more about their story or what they've learned over the last couple months. That's kind of the plan for right now. But I'm not saying that we won't go in a different direction if something's really working for the community.
And I think that's a good idea to preface that, if something happens that's really like foundationally changing for the brand in a very good way that people enjoy, then you can kind of run with that. I think it's the idea that there's more of a fluid nature to business in total. So it allows, it almost necessitates to have the information be displayed in a fluid manner as well. Maybe next time you didn't say everything you need to say, we'll have you on again. We'll have the same opportunity. Similar to what we like to promote on this podcast as well, we like to make sure that everybody gets the information from primary sources or from credible, factual bases of information, so that everything is kind of through the guise of learning and gathering knowledge in the way of kind of fighting ignorance as well. And we just like to help people. And I hear a lot of that from what you're saying, JD, is that you want to get in touch with these people so that they can share the experiences, not just simply because you feel like that's something you'd like to do, but you feel like it'd be valuable for other people. And like I said before, I do believe that's very selfless. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being able to do this. I think the last video you made was about 5 minutes. So are you usually hoping to make about a half-hour long video or upwards towards an hour like we do, or what are you kind of thinking on that?
Yeah, I think watching the trends in the generational shift, right? Going back to baby boomers, they might have been able to sit and watch an episode of 60 Minutes, right? That format worked for them. The format that's working with our generation and younger generations is quicker formats. So I'm shooting for about 20 to 30 minutes with each of my episodes. Just like I said, very casual conversation with these people. And then having that opportunity to follow up, breaking up the segments, having one conversation here and another conversation in a future episode.
Yeah.
But if we're having a great conversation, I'm not going to cut it off at 30 minutes, right? If we go 45, 60 minutes, that's wonderful.
Perfect.
But the goal is to keep it short.
All right. Well, I'll keep that in mind for sure. And I think that's good because we've had a couple episodes on here so far go over 2 hours, and there was an episode we had to actually break up into 2 parts that was over 3 hours. And I think it gets to a certain extent, or it gets to to a certain time with time of how long somebody's actually going to expect to be watching a video for. And yeah, it is a new generational thing. It's like this low attention span, and maybe that's been propagated through the use of social media and like the second or the minute long videos, which I'm just as guilty about because I make those as well. But with that in mind, I could agree that it's probably a good idea to try to see how things go.
It's not just about the attention span though. It's about the information that you can take in at one time. And your brain needs a break every once in a while to process the information, give it some time to rest, and then come back for more.
So before
it is.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
Before you look at the time of how long we've been speaking, how long do you think you and I have been speaking for?
Well, okay, I just looked at the clock, but I feel like it's been about 15 minutes. I know that's not. I know we've been going a little bit longer than that.
Yep.
So time does move quickly when you're having a good conversation, right?
Oh, for sure. And I still have. Not my number one questions. I'd say you actually already answered one of my questions about the time, how often you were going to do the podcast, and how long you were going to do the videos. So I guess that takes that out of the way. But hey, I would say, obviously you're going to have to see how things go, but I have a feeling that your episodes will probably go a lot longer than you intend. But in a good way, it's the same way as like you'll have to do more editing. But you'll figure it out as you go, and that's part of the
right. And part of it with doing any kind of content is you have to watch the trends. And we kind of touched on this before, right, is being fluid. If the trends are showing that, hey, people really like these 20, 30-minute episodes, or, hey, people are loving these hour episodes because they can still watch it in chunks. They don't have to watch it all at the same time, but they like the content, right? It's got to be about them, too.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I certainly try, I keep in mind when we have conversations, like where exactly, while I edit it, especially if I have like an hour long and then I have like 15 minutes and like whatever, I can understand that somebody that's enjoying that conversation, if they feel like, okay, that conversation's like all I kind of wanted to stick around for, and then we speak, we start to speak about something else, they might say, I'm probably good on this episode, and maybe I'll watch the rest some other time, and maybe I won't.
But it is about having that option for people that are feel like, I'm really enjoying this content and there's more available for me. I don't specifically like this exact thing, but I'm not, missing out or feeling like I'm missing out the next time I watch an episode because everything's like individualized. I think it's important to kind of create your own trends, however, because things might be going good in a certain way, but there's so many variables when it comes to concluding what exactly is working for you, especially when you're trying to make content. So that's just an interesting thing to me is exactly like how many variables act at the same time when trying to create anything, pretty much.
Sure.
I'm going to get right into one of my questions. We pretty much already touched about this, which is basically the main direction of your podcast, Built from Below. I think it's a really good idea. The name is very fitting as well. And when it comes to what people can expect from it, it is about, coming together and creating something or showing how people have created things in the past. I know I kind of just answered that question for you, but I think you had already answered that as well, pretty much as well. So I guess we'll just go right to number 2, however. Obviously, I have a lot of information for you. I have a lot of people that I can get in contact with that are like, I've been in business for just now 5 years last month of November. There's people I know that have been in business for, 25 years or et cetera. So I want to ask you, what is the quality or the caliber of some of the guests you would like to have on? I know you said you wanted them to be small business, but there are certainly people that are still local business that could be considered small business, but have done very well for themselves.
Sure. And as we've talked about this in the background. I wasn't really sure in the beginning if I wanted to go to small business, I wanted to do local business. I don't want to have that feeling of, hey, this is only content guided towards our area.
Sure.
So I wanted to open it up to small business. And while, I may lose a couple, or I may have to do a little bit of scope creep and talk to bigger businesses just because,
I'm sure it'll sell well.
just because, they're local, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of stick towards the small business mentality, but there's absolutely something to be gained from larger businesses. Whether
Sure.
it's having employees or even a bigger building, right? It can come down to the smallest things that can persuade somebody to take that leap, take that next step in their journey.
So for somebody who would say that works at like, for example,
The Weissmans, with their, what is it, metal recycling, I'm pretty sure. That's technically, that's like a local business. He's from the area, but he's a billionaire, and that company's a multi-million. I think pretty sure it's a multi-billion conglomerate. Basically, it was Upstate Shredding. If anybody's familiar with Upstate Shredding, so with that in mind, I think it'd be very interesting to have a conversation with somebody like that who basically, started local, but has risen to the extent to as a horse in the Kentucky Derby.
Right.
So to that extent, I think obviously you would like to allow yourself to kind of play with whatever the options are when that time comes. Would you necessarily disinclude somebody because of how they were? Say you want to talk to like the CEO of Starbucks at this time.
If that person is willing to have a conversation with me,
right.
That's a content machine. I'm not going to say no to that. No.
Right.
But I get where you're going is, what kind of people are you really trying to get to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I would say I want to start small. I want to build a community around small business. Doesn't even have to be super professional people, right? People who are willing to come on here and tell their story, no matter what their business is. But again, getting the perspective, a different perspective on things, is huge for different types of business. And I'm not saying if you want to go into crocheting yourself stuffed animals, right?
Sure.
That you're not going to learn something from that Starbucks CEO or vice versa, right? No matter who you are, you can learn something from anybody doing something else. It's seeing something totally different than what you're used to. And I see that in my position all the time. I work in one building most of the time. I see a lot of the same things.
Yep.
But when I go to other buildings and experience different things, different people, different perspectives, I'm always learning something new.
And
so I would never shut down somebody and say, hey, no, I'm actually not looking for a business of your size or the business type the business model that you follow.
Well, that's very interesting. I think at some point maybe you will have a you'll determine for yourself the content that you appreciate the most and what maybe you won't tolerate.
We're going to take a break for a second. First of all, we got to talk about one of our favorite things, and we also got to make sure that we promote JD's new channel. Everybody, please go check out Built From Below. I think it's just at Built From Below. He's got, I think you have a video out now, or is it still in private settings?
I will have it up in a few short moments after this.
Oh, fantastic. So by the time this video drops, it should be up. So please go check out his channel. We're very happy to have him on today. And, of course, always happy to be working with JD, good friend of mine. And, yeah, everybody, if you could just spend some little time. I'm not sure if you have any social media accounts that people could follow as well, but give as much love as you've ever given to me to this guy as well. He deserves it. And as well, every episode is always brought to you by Socks with John. We started doing things a little bit differently. Hopefully that starts paying off with the formatting and everything like that. I asked people if they wanted to start using the hashtag Socks with John so that I could see their types of socks. We're going to start collaborating with some people as well soon. I've reached out to some companies to see maybe if I can make a video with them. We'll see how that goes. But as for today, thank you always, Socks with John.
Years-ish now?
I started this back in November of 2019, so I'm actually just 5 years into business since last month. I think it was the 11th or 12th is when I started the sole proprietorship and when I ordered my my ice top from Hong Kong.
Okay. And I like the question that you posed earlier is what was your biggest mistake leading up to now? And maybe that's a different answer than you gave that person, when they originally asked you. Maybe you've made a different mistake, but can we talk about that?
100%. So the question is, what was my biggest mistake?
Yeah.
My biggest mistake was trusting the wrong people. It was trusting the wrong people. The largest reckoning that I've had to face in business was one of my old business partners screwing me out of a business entirely. The way that it worked, basically, this was an individual who long story short, it basically ruined his life. He was addicted to coke. He was a raging alcoholic. He had a terrible relationship with his parents, so he had nobody left for him, basically. He had a lot of things going on in his life that made it difficult for him to get help. And so eventually the catalyst of kind of what put him on a really bad track to need the help that I had provided for him, he had crashed his truck while he was drunk driving, basically. Had to pay a lot for insurance, had to pay a lot for health insurance, basically like all the money he got for, while he was out on these oil platforms and out west. Was gone. So, if you're working 80-hour weeks for 2 weeks at a time, and then you have 2 weeks off, what you told me, it's basically all you do. You work for 2 weeks, you get all that overtime money, and then you just blow it the next 2 weeks, and it's like, oh, wow, yeah, that doesn't seem like a really healthy environment. Anyway, so I brought him into the business, and, I let him live with my parents for like 2 years, and then after our first year, we moved into a place with another buddy of ours. Long story short, I bought a business for my brother who he was kind of letting it go to trash because of COVID. So at the beginning of 2021, we had bought the business together. But because I was doing the ice cream business and he was doing the fish tanks at the time is what we bought, he actually had 51% ownership of the fish tanks. And I had, everything else, obviously. So when the time comes to go into business with somebody else because the going got good, that's exactly what he did. So he went into business with somebody else, and it was a really inopportune time for me because it was after something really bad had happened with the ice cream. My fiance's grandfather had died and ruined a big opportunity for us, unfortunately. I'll say that now. Yeah, it sucks to say that, yeah, that's kind of what's happened, and it was somebody else's fault that, a big opportunity was ruined. But that's what happens when you trust people that aren't necessarily worth it. So my biggest mistake or my biggest regret is that I trusted people that weren't trustworthy in business.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a problem for a lot of people. I guess the big thing to learn from that is not only to trust the people around you, but how to know who to trust. And that's probably a much larger subject, a bigger thing to
learning
down.
How to trust, or but it really just comes through experience, and you'll probably hear this a lot in your ventures of trying to get information from business owners, is that you really just have to go through the experience of understanding what is somebody or what makes somebody that you can trust. I've gotten to the point now where I can sit down with somebody and within the first couple minutes I could tell you a good amount about them that they have not shared with me, simply because of my
I have a little bit of insight when it comes to how I interact with people, and through my time in business, you really can't get much by me. I guess that's a good thing, but I'm sure you'll hear that a lot, being the, you just kind of have to experience it to see. But yeah, that was a really good question, though. Yeah, definitely. You learn more from your mistakes in business than you will from any of your successes. So try to keep that in mind. If you make a mistake, don't be so hard on yourself. Everybody does it. It's important as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We all have to fail every once in a while to learn, and that's the goal of everybody. Like I said before, business is an extension of yourself. So anything you learn through the business, you're learning to take into your personal life, hopefully. And not everything tracks between business and personal, but it's kind of our goal or entrepreneur's goal to not only how do I do my service or produce my product, but how can I learn how to do it better and share that with others. Right? Yeah. Not everybody takes that on, but to me, that's the duty of the entrepreneur.
It's to learn and share, basically.
Right.
Yeah, I'm down with that. Any other questions for me, JD? A couple other questions, maybe.
A couple more questions? Okay. So, with what I would say is probably your most successful business, at least right now in this current state, what drove you to start this business or a business in general?
So that's a big question. So there's a couple of businesses. Which one are you referring to most directly, like when you say?
Let's talk about your big one right now, which is the ice cream business.
Okay. So, well, that's the thing. The big one right now really isn't the ice cream, because the ice cream's out of season, so we're not really in operation.
Well, yeah, okay.
But the biggest business that I own or that I operate, yes, that would be the Vibes Rolled Ice Cream. Yeah. So one of the things that was like very difficult early on was kind of like filling the role of what I knew I needed out of myself, but then making myself that person. So with my most successful business, I'll say with the ice cream. So can you repeat the question? So in regards to the ice cream business then?
Yeah, in regards to the ice cream business, what was your motivation for starting that business?
Yeah, the motivation for starting that business, it was clear. I mean, obviously it was just to fill the niche of there was no ice cream in downtown Binghamton outside of like a couple of places. But it was moreover, I really like ice cream. And I tell this to a lot of people that try to get into something with business, is just go with what you got. Go with what you have already. I love ice cream. I love sweets. I have a really good sweet tooth. I'm good at cooking. And so I combined all of these desires, these skills, these motivations. And I decided that, I basically knew at some point in my life I would have to do something in business. It's just the person that I am. I was working at a coffee shop during COVID before I quit that job to start my ice cream business. I just knew that wasn't where I wanted to be for the next 2 years, after the first 2 years of being there. So the biggest thing, or the biggest motivation for me, was more understanding that, like, if I did do it, or that I did become this person and I was working as an ice cream man, that I probably would find success because nobody else has done it yet. So there's the monetary motivation, and then there was the I want to be something motivation, or I want to become more than what I am now. I was willing to take on the risk of learning and the risk of, losing all the money that I had. Like the first time I had gone in downtown Binghamton was actually on Parade Day in 2020, which was a week before COVID. I had struggled to get everything needed or as it needed to be, and unfortunately the cart that I built was destroyed, and so I had to take it apart. I had spent weeks and countless hours where I should have been sleeping or getting ready for whatever else, instead working on this monstrosity of an ice cream cart.
From you, I would kind of want to see what you think a key attribute for a business owner, particularly small business owner, would be.
Sure. For me, I've used this word on many different occasions when referring to a lot of different schools of thought, I could say, and that word is consideration. I tell a lot of people the biggest thing that you could do for yourself as a small business owner to try to grow is to try to collaborate with other people and work with businesses that already exist. So that takes a little bit of time, and it takes a certain personality of oneself to kind of feel comfortable going to businesses and say, hey, I'm new and I'd like to work with you guys. Where do you think you guys can help me if there's any way that you guys could? But it's the consideration that you have for other people's businesses and wanting them to do good, that'll convey to them that you're somebody that should be trusted and will end up helping you in the long run. You'll do well just by having consideration and wanting other businesses to do well as well. So that's like the attribute is kind of like the thoughtfulness and willingness to work with people. That's really how you can get your business off the ground for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And being that genuine type of person that's looking out for other people, not just yourself, is going to grow your business, your community, your brand, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it's maybe a misconception for a lot of people in business that depending on what your industry is, but you might have to be a very competitive person. I have not really found a lot of competition in any of the businesses that I've done, simply because I've chosen things that weren't in a very competitive aspect, or just the field wasn't very competitive. So, for example, with the fish tank business, we knew one other person that did fish tanks in our area at all. So the competition aspect barely ever reared its head in our business. For the ice cream, there's not a lot of people that sell ice cream in downtown Binghamton. So for that, it was very easy as well. But just as well, even the people you do end up having to kind of conflict with on occasion, or you will be in the same industry or the same market as them, you just have to differentiate yourself enough to know that what you have is, valid or worth it as well. And if it's not, you'll figure that out soon enough. If you're selling a product that's not really good because somebody can outdo you, just try something different, right? Don't look to compete, but enjoy the competition because you'll learn a lot from it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The way that you're going to grow and challenge yourself is through that competition. So, I mean, just even if you're not trying to stay one step ahead, but just staying on the same level with them and learning as they do. I mean, that's one thing that I've really appreciated about talking to you is we get to bounce all these ideas off of each other and get feedback from each other.
And I think it's very important to hear it from another person when you're trying to make a decision in a lot of different aspects in life. Obviously, there's a saying that goes, too many cooks ruin the soup. Too many people working on one thing at a time. There's a lot of conflicting ideals that you can have, some roadblocks maybe when it comes to figuring out the right path. So there does need to be like the delineation of, okay, at the end of the day, like who has the final say in certain regards. But being open to everybody's opinion can be a good thing and a bad thing, but it's an important thing to do in business because you might not always be there on every front to understand the situation entirely. So it's very valuable, I would say.
Absolutely. I think I have just one more question for you.
Sure. Yeah.
The last thing that I want to try to close out every episode with is asking you or the other business owners to give a tip, just a small tip to somebody who wants to start a business.
Yeah. Well, that's it depends on the person. And usually when I try to give advice, I try to understand the person to see how it would do with them. Obviously, somebody that struggles with something in a way of like, if they have like a bodily impairment, I'm not going to give them the same advice that I would to somebody who was like readily able or bodily able. Sure. I would say my biggest piece of advice that I could give to somebody who wants to start a business is have a plan. In whatever regard, even if it's something written down on a napkin that you and your buddy had an idea while you were both, hungover from whatever at a diner at some morning, you jotted something down on a napkin. That napkin now is one of the most valuable pieces to your business. This is a quote from, I believe it's Albert Einstein. It's that a fool with a plan will beat a genius without one. Even if you don't think that you have the best plan, the fact that you have one over not having one is all it's what really matters at the end of the day. So the biggest advice that I could give to anybody in business is that you should formulate a plan. At the very least, the first step in business, my advice would be to formulate a business plan and kind of go from there. Because as soon as you put things on paper, you start to understand like what would and what doesn't work. When you entertain ideas, you start cutting yourself out from other ones. So you start the process. It's just as much as you have in your head and you have an idea for things, you need to formulate, whether it be a physical plan, an idealistic plan, or something that you write on a, like I said, a napkin, or whether it be on a whiteboard. Just have a plan and do your best to stick to it. You'll find success, along the way somehow. Or you'll learn a lot and you'll adjust your plan, as most plans do. They change course as it goes. But biggest piece of advice I could give to anybody, and that's like number one start for anybody, is form a plan and kind of go from there.
That's awesome advice. Thank you, John.
Yeah, of course. I hope everybody has the opportunity to go check out JD and Built From Below, I think it's really going to be something fantastic. It's going to complement what we do as well, so there's going to be plenty of opportunity for us to cross-collaborate as well and do some promotions for you on your channel at some point. I'm sure I'm going to be one of the first people to be on there, so everybody tuning in today, go check out JD's channel, please. I'm sure he'll absolutely treat you well. As he's usually been known to treat people well. But yeah, he's a great guy, and he's going to have some really cool content for you very shortly, I'm sure. Is there anything else you would like to say for us today, JD? I know this was quite the process of getting this done. Usually I get like one shot, and it's kind of just like a couple hour block, but I'm glad we were able to get everything pretty much for the most part throughout today. Is there anything that you would like to leave everybody with? Anybody's?
Last thing I've got to say is always keep an open mind, listen to the other side. You're going to learn a little bit, even if you're not quite on the same track as somebody else.
Oh yeah, 100%. Definitely keep an open mind. We definitely promote the idea of open-mindedness on this channel as well. So, well, I think that's all from today. JD, thank you very much for coming in and speaking with me. I think you had a lot of good information to share, and you had some good questions. And like I said, I think you're on a really good path, and so we're going to we'll be very happy to work with you, and we'll be able to work with you more in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, John.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody, once again for tuning into the In One Ear Out podcast. As always, I'm your host, John. We will see you again very shortly, I'm sure. Check out Socks with John. Check out Built From Below. And anybody else, right now, there should be some music playing. We can't hear it. But if you guys want your music to be in the beginning and the end of the podcast, we're picking a local artist for every podcast. And it'll be your chance to be on. So check that out if you'd like. Thank you again for watching. And as always, we'll see you next time. Adios, mis muchachos. Peace out.